Camille Utterback, class of 1992, is a pioneering artist and programmer in the field of interactive installation. Her work explores the aesthetic and experiential possibilities of linking computational systems to human movement and gesture in layered and often humorous ways. She has won numerous awards for her work, most notably the prestigious MacArthur Fellowship in 2009. Other awards include the Transmedial International Media Art Festival Award, a Rockefeller Foundation New Media Fellowship, and a commission from the Whitney Museum of Art. Camille's projects have been exhibited worldwide at galleries, festivals, and museums, including the New Museum of Contemporary Art, the American Museum of the Moving Image in New York, the NTT Intercommunications Center in Tokyo, the Seoul Metropolitan Museum of Art, the Netherlands Institute for Media Art, and the Taipei Museum of Contemporary Art. And those were the only the museums that I could actually pronounce. There's a whole lot more. Ms. Utterback also holds a US patent for a video tracking system she developed while working as a research fellow at New York University. She was selected as a member of the top 100 Innovators of the Year, under 35 by MIT's Technology Review, and by Res Magazine as Artist Pick of the Year for their annual 10 people who are making a difference in their field. Her work has been featured in Art in America, Wired Magazine, the New York Times, Art News, and many other publications. While busy creating her own artwork, Ms. Utterback also develops long-term and permanent installations for commercial and museum settings via her company, Creative Nerve Incorporated.
As I was sitting here, I was realizing that Williams continues to do what it did for me as a student, which was bring me these new experiences, open my mind to new ideas, and introduce me to amazing new people. So it's lovely that how much that's continued to happen as an alumni. I was on the visiting committee for the art department for 2 years, and that was really another way that I made very interesting new connections with people and had experiences that I'm really grateful to Williams College for. I'm going to show just a couple minutes of video so you have a little bit of an idea of what I do as an artist, and then some stills of some of the projects I'm working on, and then I'll talk about how I got here. So let's open this here. Can you all see that? I think were we going to turn down the lights a teeny bit so we could see? Thanks. So there's no audio, so I'll just talk over this. And again, it's really, really fast. So hopefully, if you're all interested, you can go to my website and watch some more of these. The first piece is the one that Amy Podmore did a really nice interpretation of last night at the dinner. So this piece is called Texturing, where you can catch falling letters in a projection that are actually a poem. So, and then this is Liquid Time, which your movement is fragmenting video in pre-recorded clips. This is a part of a longer series of drawing systems, where as you move, what's happening on the screen is determined by your motion. These are 3 pieces in that series that were shown at the Milwaukee Art Museum. I've scaled up that work in this situation to the side of the San Jose City Hall. It was a temporary piece, but any movement in the City Hall Plaza was tracked onto the building surface. This is a recent piece which is exploring more sort of physical situations where how people touch these sensors in the hand railing create the patterns of light in these hanging columns. In some ways, this is just about amplifying your gestures. So everything that's happening in those columns and in all these pieces actually is a result of what people are doing in the space. And I think if there's sort of a theme to my work or a metaphor, it's really that, helping people consider, how a small gesture that they do in the world sort of ripples out and continues to have influence. And then also hopefully considering, as people encounter these systems, there's no instructions, right? So the way that you encounter them is you have to start doing things to see what happens and sort of testing your actions and saying, well, what happens if I hold the sensor down for a long time? Oh, that makes a long stripe of color in these columns. Or if I tap it really quickly, there's these little blips of colors. Or in some of the other pieces, if I approach the screen, I start seeing different things than if I back away from the screen. So this kind of testing of your actions and asking what happens if I try this, what happens if I try that, I think is really important position to put people in, and maybe something we don't ask enough as adults in our culture to sort of think about how we're part of this larger system. So I hope that that is something that happens when people encounter this work. I'm going to show a couple of slides here too. Excuse me. This is the texturing piece again. I guess I should back up and say that, well, I'll talk a little bit about how I got here, but in all of this work, I do the programming to create these situations. But this was the first piece I did using a camera as an input device. It was a collaboration with another student, colleague of mine at NYU at the time, Romy Ashatov. And as opposed to using a mouse or keyboard, which is a normal way we interact with computational systems or computers, this piece was the first one that used a camera, that I used a camera as the input device. And it immediately creates a social situation, right, where not one person is in control, and people can cooperate to catch letters together or fight to try to steal the letters from each other. So that was that idea of creating a social space opened up a whole set of possibilities for me, and I really got hooked on it, which is why a lot of the works after this continued to use the camera. These are the drawing systems again. In these pieces, I was really exploring how you can create a set of rules that people interact with. So in text reading, the rule system is very simple. The letters just land on silhouettes. In this, there's multiple things that happen. So I was trying to explore how you could do that in a much more complex way, creating an interesting experience for people, but also something that was visually beautiful, that evolves over time. Here's a picture of the Abundance Project, which was the piece on the San Jose City Hall. This was such a challenge for me to scale up my work to this level. You know, the only way to test this in my studio, I had a bunch of marbles in a cookie tray, trying to imagine that those are all these people that might be out in the plaza, and trying to simulate what might happen when all these people were here. And I'm very grateful to curator Steve Dietz, who gave me this opportunity. You know, as an artist, there are these moments where you have kind of a big break to try something new, and it's usually a person who trusts you and gives you that opportunity. So that was him in this case. And I think having done something on this scale has really led me to be able to do these larger public commissions after this. There's just another image. In all these works, too, what you do in the space becomes part of the system that then other people can interact with later on. So they're also very much about time passing in the space. So one person's marks get added to the system and they're still active. So another person crossing over them, you know, the marks might explode when another person walks by them or get pushed out of the way and try to go back to the original location. So I'm thinking about how do we use kind of the idea of databases or variables in digital media, but not, you know, to store phone numbers or, you know, shopping information, but to get people to think about their presence in a space. This project started me thinking too about materials a little bit more. I had been doing projections on more flat walls and galleries, but just the way the light reflected on the building here, I think is what helped me start thinking about light interacting with physical things in a bit more complex sculptural way. So this was the next project I proposed, which was a competition. It was a commission for the city of St. Louis Park, which is right outside of Minneapolis, which you saw a little bit of video of this piece. I'm sort of amazed that I pulled this one off, actually. So again, this was one of those, I can't believe, you know, people trusted me to build this complicated, fabricated project that hangs from the ceiling and is totally embedded in the handrails. But I had a wonderful team of people, engineers, and in this project was the first time I really worked with another programmer to do the programming, because I didn't have time to project manage and develop this. Here's a detail of the hand railings. They're sandblasted glass. So basically the colors change in the railing, and if you touch it when it's pink, I don't know if I explained it well before, pink gets added to one of the columns. And I think this one very literally is just an amplification of these small gestures of touching or tapping into something that really fills the whole space. These are stills of the Liquid Time series, which you saw really, really briefly. Excuse me. What's important about this, I think, in thinking about sort of evolution of media in our culture, is in this piece I took the step to say, well, you know, we have video and film, that are recorded in a certain way. If it's filmed 24 frames a second, once that information is in the computer digitally, at this point when I started working on this series, we were exploring ways to sort of non-linearly look at different frames. So QuickTime VR, for those of you who remember that, you could spin around an object by looking at those frames in a different order, gave this illusion that you could move around a piece. But to my knowledge, no one had really thought about, well, why do we still need to play back that information in the same way we record it? So this piece basically looks at the video as a set of information. And if you want to think about what's really happening, it's kind of like a flip book stapled at the top and cut into lots of vertical strips, and any of those strips can go forward and backward independently. So you get these complex images where different moments of time from a space are all sort of co-present. And then what's controlling that is your movement as you move forwards and backwards. I just did an extension of this series. So the original Liquid Time series was from 2001 to 2003. But this is a project I just completed for the San Jose airport. So if anyone's flying in and out of San Jose, you can see this, where I extended the imagery not just to be the present, but I actually did a lot of archival research of the areas. It's a little hard to see in this one, but the right side of the screen is a street scene from the 50s, and then the part of the screen on the left is present. And if this woman keeps walking, the 50s footage has a sandwich shop as well. So I was playing with juxtapositions. In some cases, it's actually the same street corner, so that building, this is the exact same street corner from the 20s and the present, which again, the past and present kind of interpenetrate as you walk in front of the piece. There's 20 scenes in this piece. This is just more crowd scenes of people on the weekend in San Jose in the 20s and now. And some of my favorite are these more abstract gestural connections. The older footage is women in a canning factory sorting fruit, and the present footage is from Cisco Systems, people typing on their laptops, but what they're doing with their hands is actually really similar. So another overarching theme, I guess, in my work is helping people think about our physical selves, and how critical, I guess, that self is to sort of how we move and interact with each other. This is a project I'm working on now for the Sacramento airport. I'm doing a lot of airport projects. I'm so grateful to the people that got % for arts legislation passed in different states. I live in California, so these are all California projects. The state of our budget in California. I would not be doing these projects if it weren't for the % for art rules, which say, if the public is spending money on a public project like an airport, 1% has to be dedicated towards art. So that's partly why I'm doing lots of airports these days. This is 15 LCD screens that are up and down the side of a glass elevator facing into the main ticketing terminal. And I thought in this space, people aren't necessarily lingering around here. So instead of using a more specific camera or sensor-based interaction, I thought I would sort of take that a little bit one step more removed to actually react to the elevator movement. So it's still changing over time based on how people are using the space, but it's a little more removed than some of the other work I've been doing. So here's just a concept sketch. The idea is that all the animations would be algorithmic again, so it's not a fixed animation, but it's evolving over time also. So as the elevator moves, this tree might grow. While it's at rest, things would keep happening in the system. The leaves are growing. Its downward path might startle out some birds. And I was thinking, there's a lot of other ways you could play with movement, like changing the ground level so you could see what's happening underground. And I plan to react also to the time of year and the time of day in these animations. There's my website if you want to check out more. And so I think that's an interesting transition. Actually, when I came to Williams, I did not plan to be an art major at all. I thought I would probably be a biology major. I did do a lot of classes in the environmental science concentration because I was really interested in systems and how geology and chemistry and biology and meteorology and people's use of spaces all work together to kind of create our environment around us and the nature, or how we imagine ourselves interacting with that nature, however we define it. But the classes the art classes I was taking were actually what really challenged me the most. I had one of my professors, Ed Epping, had us do an assignment where we were each assigned 3 countries that bordered each other, and we had to illustrate that border in 50 different ways, which was like, oh my God, how am I going to do this? And then we managed to finish that, and the next assignment was to do it in 100 different ways. And so watching yourself come up against these like impossible boundaries of like, I can't think of any more ways to do this, and then getting through it and managing to open up into a whole nother realm of ideas, that process was just so fascinating to me that I thought, this is really what I want to do, is to somehow keep working this way of challenging myself emotionally and creatively. So I called my parents at some point and was like, I finally decided I'm going to be an art major. And I remember my dad saying, oh, why? And I explained this, that it was the most challenging thing I was doing, and I loved my professors. And he said, well, what do you think you're going to do with that when you graduate? And I said, I don't know. I don't have any idea, actually, but it's why shouldn't I pursue the thing that's the most challenging? And I think to my parents' credit, they understood that. And they've always been very supportive of everything I've done. So, but I think that in particular was one of those critical moments of support rather than challenge. But it was very difficult to be an artist. After a couple years of working at co-op galleries and trying to sell paintings in the Boston area and having to cater and sell rugs and do all kinds of other things, I decided that that wasn't actually the life I wanted, that it was much more important to me to continue to be engaged more culturally, with what was happening in my society and the world at the time. I had seen a lot of early CD-ROMs and the beginnings of the internet and thought, well, these are systems too. That was something, just watching the programming that was happening to create this first ideas of interaction. I thought, well, maybe if I learn about that, I can still do something creative, but actually, feed myself and pay my rent and things like that. So I started taking classes and eventually went back to graduate school at NYU in this program called Interactive Telecommunications. And that decision actually was also critically influenced by one of my Williams professors, Mike Glear. I was being kind of lazy and had decided I was only going to apply to the Media Lab because I was living in Boston and didn't really want to move or change my life or change my boyfriend or anything like that. And he was writing my recommendation and said, you're only applying to one grad school? And I was like, well, yeah, that's kind of where I want to go, and it seems to make sense. And he was like, that's stupid. He was like, you really shouldn't do that. And he recommended this program at NYU, which I actually knew nothing about, which is where I ended up going, and I think was a much better fit in the end for the kind of work I ended up doing. So I thought I was giving up being an artist, actually. But the work that I did there led up to the Textstream project, which galleries in New York wanted to start showing, and I got invited to all these international festivals to start showing it. And so in a strange way, by thinking I was giving up my art career and trying to learn about these new technologies, it came back to me. So I tell that story to students a lot in terms of not necessarily being stuck on the label of what you think you want to do in the world, but continuing to be open to where is it that you feel most fulfilled and most challenged, and seeing where that leads, because I think it's always a little more random than we think. And let's see, the MacArthur Fellowship. I think that was another moment in my life of hitting a kind of impasse of, turning 40 and still struggling to pay my rent and kind of deciding, maybe I don't need to be doing this artist thing anymore. Maybe I should, go get a job working in product design because I have all this experience about designing human-computer interaction, and maybe I should, apply to IDEO or Frog or something like that. And I was actually starting to talk to my various friends who knew people there and kind of think about that when I got the phone call that I now have this 5 years of support to continue working as an artist. So I'm really, really grateful to the MacArthur Foundation for that sort of scooping up at a critical moment. So yeah, I think that's all. Thank you again to Williams. I think part of the thinking, I guess one more thing, the part of my education of being so broadly interested in different fields learning to program, which I didn't do here, actually, that was much later, but thinking just about all the interconnections between different fields is really what has allowed me to create the kind of work I have. So when I talk to art students too, I say it's critical not just to focus on the skills of an artistic craft. You need to know how to write, you need to know how to think about other things, and all of that enriches what you're able to do. So I think a Williams education was really critical to that ability. So.